So my story today is really both a personal and scientific story about how I use my knowledge of neuroplasticity to change my own brain. That ended up changing my life, and that in turn changed the entire direction of my scientific research at my lab at New York University. So this story starts in 1998, and that was the year that I started my research lab at New York University. I was the most excited science nerd that you could imagine. After years and years and years of study, I could finally start my own research lab. And I was fascinated with one form of neuroplasticity, and that is memory, long-term memory. The key structure important for our ability to form and retain new long-term memories is called the hippocampus. And my lab was focused on trying to understand the patterns of neural activity in the hippocampus that allowed us to successfully form new long-term memories. And also what went wrong when we didn't form a new long-term memory and we forgot. Now, when I think back on those first 5 years or so of my research lab at NYU and the kind of atmosphere in the lab, the image that comes to mind is an image of a fantastic dinner party where there's all these people that you love to talk about, always something interesting to talk about. That's what it felt like those first few years getting started. By contrast, if I think back on that same time at NYU to my social life, the image that comes to mind is a deserted ghost town from a Clint Eastwood movie. You know, with the tumbleweed in the dirt streets? I was, early 30s, living in New York City, but I was so focused on my work. I had no social life. I had no friends outside of lab. I'd gained 20 pounds because takeout in New York is so good and it's so easy to get the takeout. I was very successful and the science was going very well, but personally, I realized I was unhappy. But everybody needs a wake-up call to actually do something about their unhappiness. And my wake-up call came on a river rafting trip in South America. I'd gone on a vacation by myself because I didn't have any friends. In South America, it was a river rafting trip. It was beautiful, and my wake-up call was this. I was in my mid-30s, and I realized I was the weakest person on this trip. There were 16-year-olds that were stronger than me, and there were 65-plus-year-olds that were stronger than me. And when I got back to New York City, I said, I never want to feel like the weakest person on the trip. And I didn't know how to fix the social stuff going on in my life, but I did know how to get stronger and lose a little bit of weight. So I went to the gym, got a trainer, and this time it stuck. One of the things that made it stick was that I found an exercise class that I loved. I became obsessed with this class. It's a class that was developed in New York City, and it's called Intensati. It was developed by an amazing fitness instructor named Patricia Moreno. So what does that mean, Intensati? Inten comes from the word intention. And sati is a word in the language Pali that means mindfulness or awareness. So the practice of intensati is a practice of bringing a whole new level of mindfulness or awareness to your own intentions. So what does that mean in terms of a class? Well, Patricia Moreno combined physical movements from kickboxing and dance and yoga and martial arts with positive spoken affirmations. So just to give you a flavor, I'm just going to ask Mooch here to help me. In this class, we would just punch as you would do in kickboxing. So 5, 6, 7. But we would add affirmations like, I am strong now, or I am inspired now. Okay, so that's class. And I have to tell you, the first time I went to the class and they told us what it was about, I felt ridiculous. It's like, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. But the idea behind Intensati is that with these affirmations, you are actually replacing negative thoughts that we all have. Thoughts like, they look so much stronger than me. They look so in shape. Or I really want a burrito for dinner, even though I'm at the gym. Replace those thoughts with these positive, affirming thoughts that we give you in class. And I have to say, by the end of that first class, it was an electric experience because there I was sweating with a whole bunch of other sweaty affirmation yelling people, and it was just so much fun. I would come out of class every time thinking, I feel like $1,000,000 and I can't wait to come back to class again. This was amazing. It shot my mood up enormously, shot my energy up enormously, and it improved my social life because I started meeting people outside the lab, which was great. But the most amazing thing that happened took about a year, year and a half in of regular work, regularly going to the gym, this class and other classes. I mixed it up. But this is what I noticed, and I noticed something at work. As a neuroscientist, I write a lot. Grants, papers, I'm writing all the time. And one day I noticed writing is going well. And that was shocking because writing never goes well. Sometimes it's like, nails on a chalkboard, very, very difficult. But I noticed specifically that my ability to focus my attention was longer and deeper, and that my memory for all the little facts that I was trying to synthesize together in a multi-million-dollar award-winning grant were easier to remember. I realized this was a huge paradigm shift in my personal life. Just by going to the gym, what happened? More energy, better mood, better social life, better attention, and better long-term memory. So this profound change in my personal life quickly kind of rolled into my professional life, because as a neuroscientist, I asked myself, what exactly is going on? What do we know about the effects of exercise on brain function? And when I went to the literature, here's what I found. One, what about the effects on mood? We know that even a single workout can increase a number of neurotransmitters in your brain right during and after the workout. These same neurotransmitters that are decreased in depression. What are the neurotransmitters? Serotonin, noradrenaline, dopamine, and endorphins. So every time you exercise, you are giving yourself a boost of these neurotransmitters. Helped explain the good mood that I had every single time I went to the workout. Second, what about the attention that seemed to be better? I was able to shift and focus attention better. Well, I found out that in the literature in humans, that all the studies on the effects of exercise in humans, the most common finding is that increased aerobic exercise can increase your ability to shift and focus attention. The most common finding in the scientific literature on exercise today. What about long-term memory? Long-term memory is dependent on the hippocampus, that structure that I was focused on, I was an expert in. But what I didn't realize is that much research had gone on, first showing that the hippocampus is one of only 2 brain structures where brand new neurons can be born in adulthood. So all of us sitting here, no matter what your activity level, no matter what you do, we are all getting some new hippocampal cells in our hippocampus. And that's one of only 2 areas where new cells can be born. But the cool thing is that studies, particularly in rodents, have shown that increased aerobic exercise can increase the number of those new neurons that are born and increase the number of those neurons that survive. Not only that, rats that run on a running wheel more, their performance on long-term memory tasks are better. And I read that, I thought that's exactly what I'm noticing in myself. So this was kind of a side project, a topic I was fascinated with. And as a professor of neuroscience, I know that the very best way to learn about a new topic is to teach a new undergraduate course on it. So I decided to teach a new course called Can Exercise Change Your Brain? And because the class was inspired by me going to the gym, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to actually bring exercise into the classroom? So I went to the administration. I said, I have this great idea. I want to bring exercise into the classroom, so why don't you just give me a little extra money? I'll hire an exercise instructor. They'll work us all out during the class, and then I'll give the academic part of the class. And they said, we pay you to teach the classes. There's no extra money to do that. I sat back, thought about it for a minute, and I thought, okay, well, let me just do the next most obvious thing. I decided to go to the gym and become an exercise instructor myself so I can teach the exercise part of the class, which I did, and of course, I wanted to become an intensati instructor because that was the class that I went to most of the time. So that started the most extensive class preparation that I've ever done in my entire career, because I had to go to 5 days of teacher training followed by 6 months minus 5 days of practice, because this class is relatively difficult to teach and you need a lot of practice to do that. Of course, at the same time, I was developing the academic part of the class. But then I had an idea. The idea was, so the class was going to be 1 hour of intensati that I would teach the students, that would lead the students, followed by an hour-and-a-half lecture discussion about what exercise was doing to their brain. And I realized that these students were going to be exercising more for the whole semester, and they could be the first subjects in my very first exercise study. So I added onto the class. I tested them at the beginning, at the end of the semester on mood tests and memory tests, and then I went to a colleague who wasn't teaching exercise in his classroom. It wasn't that hard to find. I asked whether I could test his students at the beginning and the end of the semester, so I would have a control group. And he said yes. And so I had my first exercise study, and it was so exciting. So let me bring you back to that first day of the exercise class. Can exercise change your brain? An upper division neuroscience elective at New York University. It was September 7th, 2009. And I was lecturing in the same classroom that I had lectured in academically for the previous 15 years. There were 3 things that were very, very different that day. The first thing that was different is that I was clad head to toe in my best Lululemon. I usually don't come to class like that, but you know, I had to teach exercise, so that was a little bit different. Second thing that was different, I'm not nervous speaking in front of a crowd. That day I had 15 years of experience, but that day I was very nervous because I had never taught an exercise class before. Also, I really wanted the students to love the exercise as much as I did, so I was kind of putting a lot of pressure on me, so I was quite nervous. Third thing that was different, this was the first day of the fall semester, and NYU students, they're excited, maybe a little bit nervous the first day of class. These students look scared. Really, I think it was me and my Lululemon. They didn't quite know. They knew they had to come in workout clothes, and workout was going to be part of the class, but when they saw me, I think they realized that they were going to have to sweat with their professor, and they really didn't know whether they wanted to do that. But the only way to actually see whether this was going to work was to step out in front of the classroom and say, okay, let's all exercise together. Let's do a little bit of intensity. So to bring you back to that day, I want to ask you to all stand up for just 3 minutes and to give you the feeling what's going on. So this is call and response. All you have to do is do what I do, say what I say. I'm going to show you what to do, and then I'm going to say, your turn. You say it, and then I'm going to go, and then you're going to go. We're just going to do it for 3 minutes. It's going to get our blood going. You're going to remember everything that I've said for the entire 24 minutes, okay? 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I want you all to imagine what it would have been like if every single one of your college classes started like that, okay? So, I told you about a personal change that exercise brought into my life. This is the first of 2 professional changes. Bringing exercise in the classroom, I just thought was a fun idea. What it did is it changed the way I taught every other class since. Why? Because the level of engagement, the level of interaction that I got with those students with bringing exercise in completely transformed the classroom experience. Because when you yell at people during the exercise class and you say, go harder, and then during the academic class I say, ask a question, and they do, they answer, they start asking. They ask questions, and it's fun. It really transformed. But that's not to say that I bring exercise into every classroom. What happened for me is I gave myself a new bar. That is my new bar for the level of engagement. And as I say, it changed the way I taught from that moment forward. But the second thing that changed was what happened with the experiment that I did. Did they get smarter? Did they get happier? Remember, this was only once a week. The class was only once a week. We did not see significant improvements in memory, but what we did see is significant improvements in their reaction times. The students in my class, relative to this class that didn't exercise, actually got faster at answering the memory questions correctly than the other class. The other interesting trend is that the other class that did not exercise tended to perform worse at the end of the semester, which is when I realized that I was actually doing a stress study, because there's a big difference in stress levels from the beginning to the end of the semester. But the thing that study did was it lit a fire underneath me. I thought, if I could see that with just once a week of exercise, what would happen if I could get the students to exercise not just once a week, but 3 times a week or 4 times a week? What kinds of cognitive changes could I see? And that was the start of a big professional decision in my life to switch my research focus from the electrophysiology of the hippocampus to trying to understand what the effects of exercise are on the brain. And so, I give these talks, and then, of course, people come up to me and they say, Wendy, okay, so I get it. It's good. Just tell me how much, how long, what kind of exercise I have to do. Just give me the answer. Actually, what they say is, Wendy, just tell me the minimum amount of exercise that I have to do. I really want to know this. And that's when I have to say, well, we know generally it's good, but we don't know that magic prescription. In fact, that is the first of 2 main research goals in my lab. One is to try and find the optimum exercise prescription for all of these different cognitive functions that I've mentioned: mood, memory, attention, and how they might differ across ages. Perhaps the prescription for a 20-year-old might be different for a prescription for a 50-year-old. How they differ across different genetic backgrounds. How they differ across different baseline activity levels. There are Olympic level activity, there's regular level activity. How does that factor into this prescription to improve your cognitive function? That's goal 1 of my lab. Goal 2 of my lab is to understand what are the pathways and the mechanisms that are allowing movement down here in your body to change something up here in your brain. We're just starting to understand some of those chemical pathways that are involved. We hope to be able to identify the key ones so that we can start to monitor peripherally what's going on instead of having to do brain scans. And we could do that, but it's much easier if we had the secret chemical route that is working to translate physical exercise in your body to mental changes, brain changes in your brain. I told you about 3 real paradigm shifts in my life. Personal change that came from exercise, change in my teaching, which is a big part of what I do, and third, change in my entire research direction. And I want to end with a 4th implication or change associated with this information. And this, I think, is the most important message. Understanding the effects of exercise on the brain really is important because it's telling us a different way to live and a different way to learn. There are 3 implications that I'm most passionate about. The first is the implications for schools. What if we can bring exercise into not just my little classroom at NYU, but to all the classrooms? What is that prescription to improve the brains of our students trying to learn, trying to remember, trying to understand? In fact, we're starting a pilot study with freshmen and sophomores at NYU. I want to try and make NYU the exercise university to see what those effects are on study habits, on grades, even on drug use. That's implication number 1. Implication number 2, what about for the workforce? Imagine what would happen if every adult in the United States increased their aerobic exercise so that their mood was better, their memory was better, and their attention was better. Would that affect productivity? I think so. And third, getting back to some of the beautiful things that we've heard here today, what are the implications of exercise for aging? Exercise is not going to cure dementia. Exercise is not going to cure Alzheimer's disease. But both of these conditions affect the hippocampus. And what exercise does is it literally strengthens the hippocampus. It allows more new brain cells to be born there. We know those brand new brain cells work even better than the old brain cells. So a lifetime of building up those hippocampal brain cells, again, not going to cure Alzheimer's disease, but it's going to keep your hippocampus and your memory working longer than it would have if you did not exercise. So the simple message that I have is that aerobic exercise is critical for the way we live, the way we learn, and the way we teach our children. Thank you very much.